S10E25. That's all we need.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me this week I've got Dan. How are you, Dan?
I'm all right. I'm probably a little bit disappointed in the last couple of results, if I'm being honest. It's not been... I think some of the positive vibes that we were building under Sayers, kind of the last couple of performances have kind of, I think, like whittled away at some of those again. So we're sort of, I don't know, we're chasing our tail a little bit at the moment, which is a bit frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting little patch of fixtures, and I think obviously the loss to Stoke doesn't help it. But I think coming into the run of sort of Burnley, Norwich, Sunderland was always going to prove a challenging run when you've got some of the teams around us playing each other. So, you know, by nature, they'll be picking up points. And like, I think we've got Plymouth playing Luton tomorrow morning, where I'm just like, what do we even want out of that? Like, I guess a draw, because then they both drop points, but I'm just, you know, I'd rather neither of them pick up points because it's just going to give them a bit of momentum. So there's always that sort of side of it. I think the positive spin I would put on it as well is that now we've basically got all of our tough games out of the way. Like I think it's only Coventry potentially that we have left of those sort of, you know, quote unquote tough teams. Unless there's someone else that I'm thinking of as well. No, I think like Coventry, like there might be one other team up in that sort of top 7 or top 6 that we haven't played for a second time. We played Blackburn twice or just once?
I feel like we played them twice, but I can't remember.
Yeah, that's the other one that I was thinking of. It might be, but basically, like I guess what I'm getting at, that you know, you look at like your Cardiffs and stuff, where I think they've got quite a difficult run to come, and so it's where you can't. It gets so murky when you try and analyze like fixtures and form and everything else, because everyone's obviously played a different set of teams, and you can look at, I don't know, Plymouth beating Millwall 5-1 and get really panicked, and the fact that they also did beat West Brom, who I think we still have to play for a second time, to be fair. But then they lost 2-0 to Blackburn, who we beat, and you kind of go, okay, well, are they suddenly turning their form around, or have they just kind of, you know, hit upon a couple of teams at the right time? And it really, like, look, I mean, our friend Mike in our chat getting a bit twitchy about fixtures and form and everything else, and sort of looking. But even when you look at, you know, over the last 10 games sort of form, all of the bottom 3 are still in what quote unquote worse form than us. So look, yeah, it's a tough run of fixtures, and it's one of the. It just feels like we're in that sort of holding pattern where I just don't know. Like, I'm not saying we're going to stay up. I'm not saying, oh, we're doomed. I just feel like we just don't have the information at hand. And in like 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be in much better position to either feel really confident or, you know, really pessimistic.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern probably over the last couple of games is not necessarily the results, because I think like you look at the like Burnley game, it's not one we're expected to win. But I think the nature of that performance was one where we basically posed no threat for 90 minutes, is my understanding. I like, to be fair, I didn't really watch it, and I am getting like, obviously I'm just like reading the reviews, and lots of people like love to just pull the team to shreds when we don't win. But it didn't seem like it was a particularly positive performance.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would say if there's any team in the division that I can kind of excuse posing no threat, it's like they've conceded 9 goals for the season. So I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm contractually obligated to discuss the game on the podcast, so we will talk about it. But other than that, I'm just like, draw a line under it, I think, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a valid point as well. I think the other thing that concerns me is like because we conceded in like the 3rd minute of that one.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the Norwich game, they had a really bright, they had a really good chance, like a real early in the game, like the first couple of minutes, same thing. And I was really worried that it was going to be kind of a repeat. We're going to concede really early and then just sort of be a shambles. Didn't quite work out that way. But we'll talk about that later.
Look, I think actually, I'm happy we can just talk about the games together, since you didn't really watch the Burnley game. We can just throw it all in now.
Okay. Well, all I was going to say was like in that when you look at then the Norwich game, you go, well, they had that really bright chance. Then we kind of like we actually then got some control of the game, and we had like a 15-20 minute spell where we were really really good, and we like lots of really bright attacking play, and we had them under pressure, and then we scored, and then it was like we didn't know what the hell to do because we were in front so early in the game. And instead of just like continuing what we had been doing that was working, and obviously like Norwich is like they've pushed again to try and regain like a foothold in the game. So, but I just think like we seem to go back into our shell once we got in front, and we just sort of like then sat and let Norwich dictate the game and let them sort of take control, and then of course they equalise, and it's all very disappointing. Where like and obviously it would have been probably an against the odds win had we been able to manage that, but it sort of felt when we got that first goal, the way that was happening, I was like, this is a game where we could kick on and get a second goal but then we just stopped what we were doing. So I think that's probably the frustrating part, that whatever it is, mentality or I guess lack of confidence, maybe like we're so desperate to try and get points and get wins that when we are in a position to have 3 points, we kind of go, well, we don't want to do anything to risk it, and in doing so, probably like make ourselves more vulnerable in a sense. But I think to the 1 point from those two games, I guess kind of honestly before the games, you probably go, yeah, I'll take a point, I'll take a couple of points. Like we're not expecting much. But I think based on the position that we were in against Norwich, I'm probably disappointed to have not come away with more.
And that was what I was going to ask, is if it's that reassessment or the reframing because we went 1-0 up. Whereas, because I completely agree, like I think going into these games, I was pretty pessimistic about getting anything. Like I think I joked on the podcast that, Burnley, don't really score. So if we could get a goal against them, then we could probably get 3 points there and make it, a draw against Norwich maybe, or flip that and get 4 points from a draw against Burnley or win against Norwich. But I wasn't holding out too much hope. And then you're right. Like I think you go 1-0 up and start the game in that manner, to not get the 3 points is disappointing. But is that sort of the hindsight talking rather than like maybe what we should have realistically expected?
I think, to be honest, I think it is a little bit of, we have that benefit of hindsight. And so we're looking back at that and going, I think it's kind of like looking at what was a missed opportunity, where, as you say, like before the games, probably not many were expecting to win that game. But when you look at it and you go, we were in a good position. We'd started well. We'd taken control. We'd taken the ascendancy, and then we kind of just like let the rest of the game pass us by. Was a little bit disappointing, because I thought we still some of those guys like Barry and some of those guys like started really brightly.
Gelhardt,
and then after about half an hour they sort of just faded into nothingness really, which was a bit disappointing.
And it's an interesting one, and I guess comes back to my point around just feeling like we're in that holding pattern at the moment, because it did feel like the Stoke fixture and the Norwich fixture played out reasonably similarly in terms of going ahead early, not really knowing what to do with the lead, and kind of going into our shells. In saying that, I thought we created more chances and played the game out better against Stoke, ironically, considering we lost that game. But it does feel as if, I don't know if it's progression to say that we got the draw against Norwich. I thought we got pretty lucky not to get that handball given against McLaughlin, which would have just been, another loss and sort of a similar story. But it's really hard to judge coming out of that game, is this progress? Are we sort of learning? Are we digging our heels in a bit more and sort of starting to turn that home form around a bit more? Or, as you say, it's sort of, you take that lead early, you really should be going on with it. Maybe it's nerves, maybe it's like if it is nerves, that probably doesn't bode well, because you think even in easier fixtures, it's going to, in a way, make us more nervous, because, I can imagine if we're playing like Plymouth, I think we've already played Plymouth at home, or was that away? Might have been away. So maybe if we've got Plymouth at home, I'm always like, that's such a typical City game to lose, because you just know as soon as there's any pressure on a game like that, we're just going to choke it and lose to a dodgy 1-0. And I guess that's the concern, because those are the games where at the end of the season, like if we've drawn with Norwich and we've lost to Burnley, you kind of go, doesn't matter as long as we're picking up, 3 points against a Cardiff or a Plymouth or a Luton or whoever it might be.
Yeah, I think certainly it kind of does feel a little bit at the moment where you're kind of going, like not in a fully pessimistic way, like there's no hope of anything, but it is a little bit like going, where are the points? Where are they going to come from? Which games are we going to like target, or which ones are we like? Where are we going to get these points? But I also like I'm not at a point where I go, we're doomed and we're going down. It's just like. I think, in a general sense, I think we have improved under Sayers, right? I think we look, we attack better. I think we're generally much more organised defensively as well, and we seem to have tidied up that area. I have some question marks over, like the Egan zone. Like it makes sense, like to bring in an experienced centre back, but I also go, in another couple of weeks we got Egan, Hughes, Jones, McLaughlin, who are all going to be fit, and
Burns as well.
Egan, and Finn Burns there. And Egan I don't think he's impressed that much. I only saw obviously the Norwich game. I don't know what he was. He played against Burnley. Didn't he?
It wasn't much better against Burnley.
And I don't. I would think if you're bringing someone in January like that, they have to be a definite improvement. And I don't see that he was.
Yeah.
And I think when Hughes comes back, I think he was showing a lot of promise for someone much, much younger and much less experienced. And really trying to command, that back line and take control of situations. That I think once he's fit, I can't see any reason why he's just going to slot back in. I would think. Which kind of goes okay, so we brought in this player who, was it just for experience? Was it similar to the Amrabat where you're going, we brought someone in for experience to try and mentor the younger players? And is that a worthwhile?
Yeah.
Is it worth it? Or yeah,
it sounds as if he was a reasonably cheap deal. I think it was like 200 grand or something. So maybe I definitely see your point, and I've definitely seen the point made, which I don't disagree with, about the bloat. And it is another window where we've signed a lot of players where I don't necessarily think we needed to. Like Enrique, I'm just he take it or leave it with him. Yeah. Amrabat, you're right. He's a bit of experience, but I'm ultimately it's a difficult one because I feel like a lot of the time we try and be clever and bring in depth players at the start of the window so that if everything else falls flat, we're at least able to say, well, we've got some players in, we're not panicking and feeling, that our hands forced to get players later in the window. And we saw it last year with Sharp coming in on New Year's Day, where we thought, oh, if we don't get anyone else, and we did end up getting Ohio, but, if we didn't get anyone else, at least we've got someone in the door. Similar, we've done that with Amrabat. Even though Egan came in right at the end, I feel like he was brought in to basically say, look, who knows if Hughes is going to have a setback with his injury, that sort of hamstring injury, that could take a while to get him back up to speed. But who knows what's next? But I think at that point we weren't really convinced by Burns necessarily. I think he was injured as well. And you go, well, McLaughlin's looked reasonable at left back. He's not getting into a team of the season at left back, but he's he's serviceable. So if we're playing him out there, we want to have an extra centre back as cover. Touch wood that Jones doesn't go down. But the Egan one, I guess, sort of makes sense from that perspective. But then in a couple of weeks, we could suddenly, like you say, we could have everyone fit, and then Egan might not even make the bench. And it's one of those ones where I feel like it happened last season as well, where we had that really injury-prone season under Shotter. And so last year we brought in a few extra players to sort of cover for that and ended up having way too many players, and then Rosenia got rid of a bunch. And then this summer we brought in a whole bunch again because we had the squad turnover, and then we've got injuries and we've had to do it again. And it's we just can't seem to get the balance right where we finally have a window where we've got, a reasonably settled squad and we're just sort of picking around the edges on what we improve, which I hope is what this summer will be. But I completely, I take your point on Egan. He hasn't really excited me that much, but I do think the intentions for him to be there more as a depth player necessarily than a starting player.
Yeah. I just think like, as you say, like we brought in like 6 or 7 players, and apart from maybe like Elliot Matazzo, probably didn't spend that much overall. Like a couple of loans, I think like Amrabat's cheap, Egan's cheap. Like some of these guys, like next to nothing on some of them.
Oh, I guess
And
Joseph was the other one. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think I'd probably, in all honesty, rather just go like, and just on like on the Egan, you say McLaughlin's played okay at left back. Well, left back is probably the position that needed filling more than than bringing in a depth centre back. So why didn't we just go? Well, let's not bring in let's not bring in Enrique, let's not bring in Egan, but let's put all that money towards like an actual left back and get someone who is like quality, like reasonable quality in that position who can go, we have like a first team quality left back, maybe not the best left back in the league, but we have a first team quality left back here who's going to play every week. And if they're whatever, they come in, they get injured, then sure, shuffle packs around. You've got Matty Jacob there, you can shove McLaughlin in, but it seems weird to bring in a centre back and then shoehorn another centre back out of position. Like I just don't get that.
Yeah, and it sounds like Sayers wanted to get, is it Charlie Taylor? I think it was from Southampton.
Yeah, that's right. We were talking to.
Yeah, and I think Sayers basically said, well, if we can't get him, none of the other options will look worthwhile pursuing. Who would be that much better than McLaughlin? Yeah. And the other thing about this, which again, it's part of that complicated thing where we have to almost be working on hypotheticals, is there's a world where, well, a very likely world, I think, at this rate, where Giles doesn't get signed by Borough because he's looking awful for them. I think he got dropped for their last game, where he comes back to us. And if we've signed like a modest waged left back and Giles then comes back into the squad on whatever he's on, 30K a week or whatever the rumor is, all of a sudden you're going, okay, well, we've got to get rid of one of them, or, we're playing our preferred left back who we've just signed this January, and what we're just going to put Giles on the bench, kind of destroying his value. It does get really complicated, and I guess that's probably why we wanted someone in on loan, so that we could sort of have a balancing act with Giles if he does come back. But yeah, it's a really complicated one, and like it's not necessarily a criticism. Like I'm not necessarily criticizing the club because it is such a tricky sort of tightrope to manage. But you're right. Like, I guess it's like, Hughes could re-injure himself and suddenly go, okay, well, it is good that we've got Egan there as cover, or Hughes could come back and be absolutely flying. And we're like, well, what was the point of getting Egan? He's just sat on the bench for the rest of the season and hasn't really, added much to the team. Enrique, I laugh at because I'm like, that's just Ajun being Ajun, I think. Like, I'd be shocked I wouldn't be shocked if we don't see Enrique at all. I saw some post recently reminding me of when we signed Ghetto and Fatty from Egypt. And I think, Ghetto seemed to be one of those like almost like luck of circumstance where he did actually work out and he scored a bunch of goals, and probably Steve Bruce was pretty shocked that it was actually worthwhile. But Fatty, on the other hand, I think played one game and then was just banished from the team because it was like you bring these guys in as PR and that's pretty much it. And it just feels like all these Fenerbahce guys, by and large. I actually forgot that Pedro was at Fenerbahce before he signed him. I'm like, that's easily the best quote unquote signing from Fenerbahce that we've made. But I mean, look, to sort of bring it back a little bit to the games, like the Burnley game, as you said, conceded pretty early. Once we conceded, you just like, I was very close to just switching off because I was like, we just know how this is going to end, 1-0 to Burnley. And, they did score a second to prove me wrong that they could actually manage a second goal, which doesn't reflect that well on us. But interestingly, and I'll talk about him a bit, I'll get your opinion on him for the Norwich game, but I had Alzate down as my man of the match against Burnley. Panda, I gave the 2 to, and Gelhardt the 1 vote, only because really we didn't offer too much at all, and it was very difficult to find players to nominate. But you talked in the chat post Norwich about the midfield, and I think it sort of ties into the point we were talking about with I guess after we scored the goal and we went into our shells, it just felt like the midfield really lost control of the game. And to start the game, we were looking really bright. We were getting the ball out to Barry and Gelhardt. I just felt like Alzate it was almost one of his worst games for us against Norwich. He just seemed really anonymous, and I don't know if we need to put like Puerta or Matazo maybe deeper to play like alongside him, or Slater maybe to play alongside. It feels like we're playing with a 6 and then 2 8s, whereas maybe we need to play with 2 6s and a 10, if I've got my numbers right.
Look, I was pretty disappointed with the midfield 3 as a whole in the Norwich game. There were moments where they individually sort of like maybe stood out for a bit, like some, I think you mentioned some nice crossfields from Slater and stuff. So there were some moments where but I think overall, as a collective, that was probably the worst game that our midfield 3 has had in a long time. Definitely, probably their worst under Sayers, where they just seemed just completely ineffective for essentially like 60, 70 minutes of the game. Like apart from that, and even in that first 20 minutes, a lot of our good stuff was going down wide, and it was Barry working his way past the defender and then putting a cross in, or it was some sort of interplay with like Coyle and Gelhardt and guys sort of down the other side. So I think I was pretty disappointed with the midfield as a whole. I think I'm not 100% sure what's going on with Puerta. I think maybe like the comment from Sayers was like that he basically was like, I just picked who I thought was best, for the moment or whatever. Like, but there's all this like, there's lots of back talk about like, there's lots of this like back behind the scenes talk about like Puerta must be like he's close to like a trigger in his contract, in his loan agreement that would like mean that we have to buy him, and it like again all sorts of complicated stuff where they like it's like you can't trigger that until like after this date, so that like purchase falls into this like frame of the FFP or whatever like nonsense. They've obviously like they've come out and they've rubbished that, but it just seems really strange that like he has been so good for us, and in a game like that where you really need someone who's aggressive and going to battle and go and like try and make stuff happen. I actually thought he would have been the perfect person to bring on, probably at half time, to be honest. And
I would have started him.
Well, that too, but if he wasn't going to start and you go, look, the midfield's not working, get him on. I think like it really changes the game. I think the way I just hate that we conceded like it was like right after half time.
Yeah.
That was so frustrating. Like off the kickoff, they just like sort of walked through and scored, and you're like, far out.
Because I think I jokingly mentioned, it was a couple of weeks ago on the podcast with Dylan, I want to say, I sort of half jokingly said like, conspiracy theory, it's this clause. And I'm not claiming that the rumor started with me. Oh, I hope the rumor didn't start with me because I definitely don't know anything. But it did seem to grow legs that a lot of different people were starting to speculate that. And the one thing I will say, what I'll say, wasn't he player of the month for December or something? Like I swear he was voted as. So
I think so. Yeah.
This is all this talk about like, when a player's not playing, everyone overrates him or thinks he's better than he was, and it's like, well, no, he literally was voted player of the month for December while playing, and everyone's now saying, why is he suddenly not playing? If Sayers really wanted to rubbish the talk about it being the clause, just bring him on for the last 2 minutes of the game or like last 10 minutes of the game. It's just the fact that he's getting 0 minutes. And also what confused me, because I was listening to the 1904 Club where Baz Cooper was trying to sort of rubbish all this speculation. I'm pretty sure it was Baz himself who during the January window said he's getting close to the clause. We're negotiating with Leverkusen, presumably either to delay the fee or renegotiate the fee or whatever it might be. And now all of a sudden they're saying, oh no, he's nowhere near the clause. Like it's got nothing to do with it, blah, blah, blah. Where I'm just like, I really want to take it on face value and just say, yeah, look, we've got a lot of midfield options, but it's just so strange that he's gone from scoring against Doncaster in the Cup to basically not playing at all, not even getting a look in. When, as you say, like it was very clear that from that first half that we were losing control in the midfield, we were getting overrun, and they scored straight after halftime, and we didn't make a change at halftime, particularly to bring him on. I get we've got Matazo on the bench as well. We've got, is there someone else on the bench? That's basically it, Matazo and Puerta, I think. But you think surely it just seems like there's got to be something to it.
Yeah, he's too good. He's too good to sit on the bench for 90 minutes. Is the short version, and so there obviously is something else going on. And like, if it was like a niggle or something, obviously they just come out and say that. That's why.
But also, why is he on the bench if he can't play?
Yeah.
So then I'm like, he must be able to play. But it's just bizarre.
Yeah. So there's obviously something else. So I feel like that situation is a bit of a watch this space. Hopefully we'll get some answers soon. I mean, hopefully, like, he just comes out and plays against Sunderland, you know, and scores a goal, and everyone can just, you know,
Move
shut
on.
up and get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But then otherwise with this game, not much else to cover. You know, he scored in the first half, was a great overlapping run with Coyle and Gelhardt. I don't know if you've seen all the stuff on social media about Coyle swearing towards the crowd after the goal. There's been a bit of a, you know, kerfuffle made about it. I just couldn't care less if he wants to swear. Like, you know, if there's someone in the crowd who's been abusing him, or even if they're just sort of, I don't know, giving him pelters about his crossing or whatever it might be, if he wants to turn around and fire himself up by yelling at them. I mean, look, the only thing I would say slightly to draw back on that is, I think my understanding is that's the family stand. So there might have been a lot of kids around, and if he's sort of yelling in their general direction, that might not be great for the kids. But look, in the heat of the moment, if, you know, you're pretty fired up, you've just got an assist after probably not having done too well for a few games, it doesn't overly bother me.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mountain out of a molehill situation. I think, like, you're right, it's been blown out of proportion a little bit. Like, I feel like it's one of those, it's similar to the Kamara one. It's like optics isn't great, but at the end of the day, it's not really like that big of a deal.
I was just going to ask you, are we going to get a press conference with him sort of sitting there with
Sayers holding Coyle's hand? Make sure you say sorry. Not sure. I just think, like, it's not like he went up and he, like, screamed, like, directly in someone's face, or, like, you know, really clearly pointed someone out. Who knows what it was probably like he got the ball and then someone someone just yelled out and, like, I'm going to get better as well. You know, someone yelled out and told him he was crap or something, like, or like that he's the worst, like, captain ever wear the shirt or something, and then he set up the goal, and, like, and it's probably just like that sort of that reaction, and I didn't even, like, I saw it during the game, like, didn't pay much notice. I just he's pumped up, cool, whatever, move on
indeed. Your votes for this one?
I don't know. I'll give, I don't know. Let me think. I really struggle with this one. I'm gonna 3 points to Barry, but I don't actually know if he, like, necessarily deserves all three. But I just actually don't know who else to give them to. I thought he had a really bright, like, first maybe like 45. I think he really seemed to get tired, but he was really involved in a lot of nice play down that left-hand side and taking on his defender and getting into the box and getting some crosses happening, particularly that first 20. But there was some other nice stuff throughout as well.
It was interesting, actually, that Burns said that he had been struggling with a bit of a knock, and that's why this was his first start. So that might explain maybe, like, match fitness-wise, he sort of dropped off.
But I thought, there were some really nice moments, and it kind of started to get a glimpse of sort of, you know, the play that we were, you know, excited to sign and hoping to see in the back half of this. So, you know, he's got a couple of games to get up to sort of Harry Wilson kind of standards for us, and then just banging a bunch of goals to finish the season.
That's it. Yeah.
I think I'm going to go 2 points to Coyle for the assist and 1 point to Crooks for the goal. And that pretty much just for those reasons. I think, I think Coyle, I thought he had a reasonable game. And, you know, after copping a bit of flack, as we sort of mentioned over the last few games where he's not been that great, I thought he was generally just a little bit stronger all around. and a nice bit of interplay to set that goal up. And then, the goal to a point to Crooks. Admittedly, it was about the only good thing he did, but it was a pretty good thing. So I'll pay it.
Good finish. No, I had to laugh before when you said that the central midfield had probably their worst game under Sayers, considering 2 of my top 3 votes are coming from that central midfield. Look, I went Slater for the 3 votes just because I did think that, I guess it was more for consistency than anything else. I thought he was one that throughout the 90 minutes was, sort of consistently trying to drive us forward and create a lot of chances. Like you sort of touched on before, those cross-field balls to open the game up, to get the ball to Gelhardt or Barry on the wings. I thought opened up the play a lot for us, which was really, really great from him. I don't know if his range of passing is really something we normally see. So it was actually quite a good sort of dimension that he was adding to his game there, rather than just sort of picking the ball up and sprinting forward himself. Crooks, I gave the 2, like you say, I sort of struggled for votes, and so I just kind of gave it to him for a really smart finish. 2 goals for him already, really settled. Of the new signings, clearly just about settling in the best of any of them, I think, off the top of my head. And then McLaughlin for the 1 vote, who, look, I sort of struggled with that one because I do think he probably had some of the more shaky moments during the game, with that handball. And then I think he just does like a panicked sort of half clearance to get it away from him. And then it doesn't even go out of play. So immediately back under pressure. But I have been surprised a little bit with how mobile he's been getting up and down the wing. Some of his footwork to get out of tight spaces and get around players was quite good as well. So more of a 1 for effort / exceeding expectation, I guess, with that one. But that's about it for those games. And then we can just, sort of quickly look ahead to the Sunderland game. So if I was trying to put a positive spin on this and look at how we could come away with a result here, they did lose to Leeds yesterday morning, which did all but confirm that they can't make the automatics. I think there's something like 8 points behind second place, which, at the rate of, sort of points per game at that end of the table, that's really quite a difficult mountain to overcome. But then at the same time, they're really quite safely within the top 6. So you almost, maybe if it was a few weeks later, you'd be more confident in saying it, but you'd almost say that they're on the beach, so to speak, in terms of not necessarily going 100% and more sort of getting themselves geared up for a playoff campaign, which is very, we're still middle of February, so it's very early to say that. But if I was trying to find a positive slant, I'd say, look, they might not have that same burning desire that we might coming into this one.
Yeah, look, I think this is going to be another tough game. I mean, to be fair, all the games that we have coming up for the rest of the season, based on our position, based on how we're traveling, every game's going to be a tough game. So that's kind of like a given phrase for sort of every week on the pod. Next game's going to be a tough one. But, look, they're a good team. I think they've probably they kind of surprised me a little bit this season with how well they've traveled. They've kind of I think they've kind of snuck up on me a little bit with I don't think they've been great the last couple, but this season it seems to have clicked for them, and they're really they're traveling quite well. So I think I don't know. I guess they've got a short turnaround on the game as well.
Yeah.
Maybe that helps us out a little bit. We've got the few extra days recovery. But I'm not overly confident. I think it's similar to the Norwich. If we can snag a point, it'll probably be a pretty good point. I'm not super confident that we can easily get a win. So kind of if we take anything out of this game, I think it's probably going to be a solid, a solid point, or an amazing 3 points if we nab something. And unless we get demolished and it's a 6-0 or something, then I won't be heartbroken if we lose. I'm kind of in that situation with this game.
Yeah. Sunderland, I sort of look at rather jealously as the team that I had hoped that we would be this season, of taking advantage of a rather weak relegated 3 teams and seizing that opportunity to put together a reasonable squad and really have a tilt at the automatic places and sort of consolidate or what's the word? You sort of settle for a playoff place if you can't make the automatics. And I thought that would be the sort of position we would be in this season. Unfortunately, not the case. But I kind of agree. I put them in that same bracket as the Norwich game, where I think, especially with Plymouth playing Luton tomorrow morning, and by nature, one of them has to pick up points and maybe both of them get a draw. If we can get a draw in this game, I think that's a good result in that sense to kind of keep the points churning over. I don't see famous last words. I don't see it as a game we'll get belted in. I think the last 3 fixtures have been 1-0. They beat us 1-0 at the MKM last season. Then we beat them 1-0. I'm trying to remember who was it. Philogene maybe got the goal, and then of course they got the 1-0 win earlier this season when Bobby Madley shepherded Puerta for their break down the field. So look, if the trend continues, I guess that backs us for a 1-0 win away at Stadium of Light. But look, I sort of at the start sort of said like this 3-game run, Burnley, Norwich, Sunderland. If I was being completely honest, I'd probably say expectation was 0 points, and anything above that's a bonus. And whilst in the short term that means that people might panic because we might slip into the relegation zone as other teams have more favourable fixtures, I try and think of it as the fact that, well, that means we've got the favourable fixtures right. You look at our run after the Sunderland game, and it's a really, really favourable run where there's 6 or 7 winnable games within the next 8, where you go, that's a really massive opportunity to get some momentum and go on a run where I can't panic. I can't find myself panicking the same way some people have been over. Even if we lose to Sunderland, I don't think I'd be sitting there panicking. Like, to me, it's just, there's no free hits, but you kind of go, these aren't the games that are going to decide whether we stay up or not. Like, if we come out and beat Cardiff next Thursday, that's massive. And that's, that's a much more vital 3 points than, the last thing I'd want is to do, well, I can't say I don't want to win, but I wouldn't want to be beating Sunderland and then losing to Cardiff, because I think it's more important to beat the teams around us, to deny them points as much as for us to gain points. So I do think we can beat Sunderland. I think for the reasons I said, like, I think they'll be low on confidence. I think we're going there with, nothing to lose, so to speak, sort of like we did with Sheffield United. So I'd back us to go up there and win 1-0 for sure.
Yeah, I think sort of as you say in regards to like picking up points and everything. I think like the other thing is like the way the bottom of the table is, and obviously we still have a fair way to go, but it is so tight at the moment, and so it's not like a single win or a single loss at this point dooms you to relegation or whatever. There's still so much to play for in the coming weeks, and I think even at the moment we're a game in hand over Derby, and are we a couple of points, or are we the same points?
1 or 2 points. I think we're 1 or 2 points ahead,
And so, like, even there's it's the tiniest little bit of breathing room, but there is still like there's a little bit of breathing room there. So I think, I don't think it's panic stations if we lose to Sunderland, but you're right. I'm sure there'll be plenty of City fans out there who are going to, be doom and gloom and probably ready to sack Sayers if we lose and drop into the relegation zone on the weekend.
Yeah, and I know you say that jokingly. I do think there's maybe not a Sayers out component. I think there are a lot of people starting to say, well, his results aren't any better than Volta's, and so what was, is he really that much of an improvement? And I think it's a bit crazy to be trying to look at that too much when you think, so Volta had a whole preseason. He had Balumi and Miller and a pretty reasonable squad, whereas Sayers has come in like November or whatever it was, and like tried to throw a squad together and kind of get us going from a pretty low base.
He's got more wins than Walter got, though, hasn't
exactly.
he? He's picked up 4 wins in less. I can't
remember if it was the same points tally or slightly more in like 4 fewer games. So it's like he is doing a lot better. And I just think, like I said, I think there's this natural sort of like, oh, we haven't won 2 games. Obviously, the Stoke game was poor, but I don't think we could have expected too much out of Burnley and Norwich. And even if we get nothing against Sunderland, I just don't think it's the end of the world. I don't want that to sound defeatist, because I do think that like there is an opportunity to get a result, but I'm not going to be getting too downbeat if we don't get one. I don't think.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the table and I'm looking at our goal difference, and like it's not great. Like -11 isn't great, but it's actually pretty good when you look at some of the other
it's worth an extra
around
point.
us. Like there's Cardiff's on -19, obviously Plymouth -32, Luton -22, Derby -13, and so if we beat Cardiff and we go like equal on points or whatever, but we're ahead of them, like safely with that goal difference. So I think that's going to be a factor heading into it, and I think the fact that Sayers has tightened us up a lot defensively is going to be a major factor, in these last, what have we got, 10 or 15, 12 games or whatever it is.
Yeah, no doubt. Just before we finish up, any changes you'd make to the side for this one? I mean, I'd almost be inclined just to Puerta maybe in for what's the problem is, right? Like you look at that, like what Puerta in for Slater, I guess would be the one to do. But otherwise, it's a pretty settled team, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be because like what Joseph started against.
Yeah, true. They're sort of alternating, aren't they?
Norwich. So it might be Pedro to start this one. And then if Barry's sort of only on the like sort of like building up his fitness again, does like Kamara start and Barry come off the bench maybe? I don't know, but I think the way that we started that Norwich game was really, really positive, and I'd probably be inclined. And in saying it, we didn't lose the game, so it's not like it's all doom and gloom. I'd be inclined to give some of those guys, give them another opportunity to start. I think, but I really think when things need to change, I think Sayers needs to be quicker. I think generally he's been pretty good with subs, but I think at Norwich he just didn't get it was kind of like reactive. It felt like, oh, this isn't going well, and now I've changed it instead of sort of I guess like being on the front foot with some of those changes, going, oh yeah, we're starting to look tired. Let's get some fresh legs in there.
It feels like he doesn't change much at halftime. It's like he tries to give the players a chance to respond. And against Norwich, that was probably not the right outcome, given how we started that half. But I think the last 2 home games, because Stoke as well, I don't think we made the best subs. But then you look at Sheffield United away, and it was like the perfect subs. So it's tricky.
But yeah, I'd like to see Puerta again, just in some capacity.
Just to stop the conspiracies.
Yeah. Preferably more than like 2 minutes, just to shut up the fans, but and the press. But apart from I think generally we have we've brought in a lot of players, but we've kind of built up a squad where pretty much everyone who comes on can contribute. So it's I don't think we necessarily have a really weak spot. I think it's just going to be down to generally just general fitness or injuries or whatever, but I can't it's not like there's anyone who's in particularly poor form. So I'd probably stay as is. I'd like to see Puerta start, but I don't you see Azate had a pretty poor game against Norwich, but he's been really good in the few games before that as well. So it's kind of where do you pay? Do you just focus on that one bad game, or do you look at the bunch of good performances before that? So,
no, absolutely. Well, it's the early game Saturday night, so it's a nice time slot here in Australia. It's on beIN Sport, so it's not on Tigers Plus for this week. But we will be back next week to discuss that result, and then be able to look forward to some nicer fixtures to come. So, thank you for joining me for this one, Dan.
Not a problem.
And thanks everyone for listening in. Until next time, come on, City.